even though I bought the requisite, systems and storage and all that stuff to fit it. So Ziki, nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you, Joe.
Like the show, nice to meet you. We already did that like 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, I know. But it's necessary for the audience,
London, what's going on in London right now? I got maybe a Londonish type day here in suburban Philadelphia. It's kind of like foggy or overcast and cold and a little bit wet.
Yeah, we're in the thick of winter, so it's pretty much everything you've said is very much representative of the London weather right now.
What's the scene there right now? What's London like right now in these crazy times?
Well, I think everyone has heard of this new Omicron variant, and so it's causing our government to panic, to put it lightly. So they've reintroduced some restrictions. So I would say since summer, all up until the end of November, we've pretty much been living in a sort of post-COVID status quo. But now, because of the Omicron, they've reintroduced face masks in almost everywhere except for restaurants and nightclubs. And trying to even remember, I think now they've recommended people work from home. So we're kind of going into a sort of mini lockdown style situation, a mini restriction, I should say, style situation.
Not surprised, but glad to get that perspective. I appreciate that. Semi-lockdown doesn't sound fun, but I kind of, the reason I'm not surprised is I have family in Poland, and I've been hearing about some of the restrictions coming down there over the last couple weeks. So I hope it doesn't cross the ocean. That's for sure. How's it like? How's the health effect of it? Have you seen anything impact your network yet, or is it a bunch of hype?
I mean, I've had a few friends or one friend, I should say, who's contracted. I don't know if it's that specific variant, because once you have COVID, they just tell you to stay at home. And she seems to be okay. I had a chat with her yesterday. Outside of it, most of the data that I've looked at, and I don't spend too much time, looking at this stuff, but from the little time I've looked into it, with the Omicron variant, the early data seems to suggest that it's not. Yes, it's infectious, but it's not lethal, nor is it putting people in hospitals as of today. Anyway, that could change in a couple of weeks. So so far it doesn't seem like there's any real reason to panic. But it's very, very hard to know what's actually going on, because I think with COVID, there's like two extremities: people who think it's nothing to worry about, people who think it's the second coming of the Black Plague, and it's hard to know where within that spectrum to really have an opinion.
Yes, I agree. It's a very, I listen to Scott Adams, which is one of the better waves, one of the two better waves in my opinion. And he talks about how when things are complex, like the best thing to do is just default to the truth, which is you can't ever figure it out, right? Like no, it's just constantly going to be battled. So just kind of sit back and relax, and just knowing that you don't know, and wherever you do think oh no, I was just pulled that way by the most persuasive element that I was consuming. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's important not to, particularly when you either don't have the training or the evidence. I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't understand that much of biology. I was all right when I was in college in my sciences, but point being is that I don't really consider myself an expert. So whatever I read, I also have to read it with the humility that I might not understand it perfectly, and therefore my opinion about it can't be particularly strong, which I think is almost the opposite to how the majority of people seem to operate, where they have really strong opinions on things that they can't possibly understand that well, to be honest.
Well, unless you realize why you are drawn to understand that, you're going to hold on to that idea a while, right? And Scott talks about that too, right? um, you know, you want to be part of a crowd, you want to be comfortable, you want to be accepted, you're really worried about what people think of you. If, you're kind of not aware of the futility of that, right? Otherwise, you're going to wrap yourself around these ideas that people, gravitate around and get all this kind of frenetic mojo going, not not anything relaxed.
Exactly. I mean, I think referring back to Scott Adams, one of the central themes of the first wave album with him is this idea of being an author of your life versus being a side character or a passenger. And I think that's maybe a very big part of what's at the heart of this, is that when you're not authoring your life, or when you lack the tools to become your own self-author, then you just get caught up in a wave, so to speak, and that's what happens.
Yeah, or you don't want to get lost in some storm, right? Yeah, but so cool. You really you like the user interface of reality, the album from, I guess, over a year ago, a year and a half ago now. That was my introduction. That was the first like whole album I listened to. But I guess you particularly like the Scott Adams waves.
Yeah, so with the waves, I'd always thought of them as kind of interesting, but not something that I would consider myself a huge fan of for a long time, um, until I think David had spoken about like an experience we had with psychedelics that really changed the way we looked at the waves. But the Scott Adams wave was the first one that definitely struck a chord with me. So I think I had come across JBP wave. I come across Jocko and Goggins wave as well. But then there was something about the Scott Adams one that just was very palpable for me. I think it's because I'm a big fan of metacognition and understanding the gears in my own brain in order to reshape the machine in a way that better suits me and my goals and objectives. So the persuasive wave, or the Scott Adams wave, was definitely probably the first album that really resonated with me.
Yeah, it was the first one I heard, so I listened to it over and over again, like you tend to do for the better part of a while, right? It took me a while to ease into some of the other stuff, but I was really familiar with Jordan Peterson, so that was the next natural step in Goggins, and you happen to mention them too. Like, so tell me about, like, you talked about, I think you talked about storytelling a second ago or something like that. But that's what you're doing with Kugali, right? Did I say it right?
Yeah, you pronounced it right.
Nice.
So yes, I'm one of the co-founders of Kugali. We're an African entertainment company that focuses on creating IP that's inspired by or created by local writers or inspired by local culture. So the easiest way to think about it is maybe an African analog to Marvel. Our main focus for much of our life has been comic books, but in the last 2 years or so, we've started to make a foray into other forms of media, starting with film and TV. So we're in the IP game, storytelling game. I'm a writer myself, currently writing and directing a TV show that's a collaboration between my my company and Disney Animation.
Oh, really? Yeah, I think I glossed over that, I guess, because I did see Disney quote it. I totally forgot about that. There was something on your website that mentioned Disney, so that's really cool, dude. And I think, no, you didn't say anything about telling stories. What it was you just saying you weren't good at, you weren't a biologist or a biologist. I was like, well, you know what you are? You're good. You're good at building a team, right? You said you got a 15-person team scattered throughout Africa, and they're creating with you. Like, what's a team up to? 15 people creating IP, right? You're a writer. Tell me about, like, yeah, what's the team look like?
Yeah, so we have a team of, I actually miscalculated it, so it's actually closer to 20 people. About a third of our team is based here in the UK, and then the remainder of the team is spread mostly across Africa. I think we have one person in New Zealand. We had like five new recruits recently, or three new recruits recently, so it's always hard to keep track. My point being is, we're a geographically dispersed team, and it's interesting because we kind of got used to the detached way of working before COVID made that the norm. Um, so we, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, these were tools that we'd been using since 2017. And yeah, it's interesting because it started off, funny enough, we started off YouTubing, blogging, podcasting, but then we really realized that there was an opportunity because when we started our journey, our goal initially was to advocate for African creators, because we realized that there was a small community of really talented creators, but nobody was really talking about them. But as we embarked on that journey, we realized that um, there was more missing. It wasn't What was missing wasn't the fact that people weren't advocating for the content. There was just a general lack of investment. And in Africa, they're not really. You can count the number of comic book publishers with one hand. You can count the number of animation studios with maybe two hands. So there just was a lack of investment and infrastructure, and we realized that these artists, these storytellers, they needed a home, a forum, a hub through which they can improve their skills, collaborate with other creators, and get their work from concept to something that resembles more of a finished product.
That's interesting. I think David mentioned seeing the same opportunity with a lack of investment in a certain aspect, right? With capsule to supply chain, specific to medicine and healthcare products.
Yeah, I think referring back to the waves, I think it's 42 rules for life. I might be misquoting it, but one of them was something along the lines of opportunity lies where responsibility has been abdicated, or something along those lines. And I think that
Yeah.
pretty much encapsulates both what David and I had clocked onto.
Yeah, and I got Naval behind me, obviously, and in volume one, he talks about he talks. Oh, geez, I just lost my train of thought. But it's the same concept with different words, right? There's obviously luck to destiny on that album, but yeah, that's important. It's you gotta have your eyes open, because I think this I'm talking about. Society always wants new things. Um, that they know that they need, but they don't know how to get it yet, right? And those gaps kind of talk to them as well, and they're not apparent to everybody, right? Naval talks about that too, like that specific knowledge, being able to see that gap, right? Not everybody could see that specific gap. So just going back to the waves, specific knowledge is what I started off my last podcast with. I start at, I guess it's bumper music at the front of every show with an instrumental part of the wave, and then I do the full song at the end. And specific knowledge landed on me, and I think that speaks to what you're doing. You probably had some sort of specific connection to Africa, right? How did you get that insight?
Well, I mean, I'm from Nigeria.
From
I
Nigeria? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
grew
how
up till I was 15 before I moved to the UK.
15 when you moved to the UK? So you
Yeah,
said?
yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Hmm.
half your life about right? Yeah, half your life now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a little bit. I don't know if disconcerting is the right word, but it's a bit surreal to think that at this stage of my life now, I spend more time in the UK than I have in Nigeria. But that's more of an identity thing, anyways. But
It totally is. Talk about an
yeah.
identity thing. I'm looking at how like white this stubble is, man. I'm looking maybe a little old. I don't like that identity. No,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's really cool. That's got to be a little bit of a conflict. Let's just be honest, right? Like where you come from and where you live and how you identify is kind of central, right? Like tell me, because I live in that situation. I'm married to an immigrant of Europe, and I think she hit the halfway mark this year. It's hitting it next year, right? So it's close to home, man. What's it really mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I never really thought too much about it when I first moved to this country because, as a 15-year-old, you don't really think about things like that. You're very much in the present. Um, but there's just certain things you start to notice. Like first thing is you go from an environment where your ethnicity, your group is the majority to where I was living in a village in Wales when I first moved here that had like a population of 20,000 people, which was almost overwhelmingly Caucasian. So you just start to notice little things like that, little cultural differences. The other thing as well is Nigeria is a former British colony, so there's some shared history between the two countries. But one of the things that happened as a consequence of colonialization is the destruction of the indigenous culture. So Ni- Nigerians ourselves in the modern era, we're really trying to kind of reconstruct what our culture is because much of it has been lost. And as a consequence of that, something called the colonial mentality emerged in the Nigerian zeitgeist, which is this disdain for your own culture and this love for Western culture, because that's how we were conditioned, right? Because if you're trying to colonize a people, you try and make them dislike their own culture and like the culture of their masters, so to speak. And that's something that stayed with us even post independent. And I realized that that's something that I had also inherited as well. So I really embraced British culture wholeheartedly because I didn't realize that the colonial mentality was sitting in my mind. However, as I started to, funny enough, I think it was because I'm a storyteller, and the thing that inspired me to become a storyteller was Japanese anime and manga. And that was the first kind of
What's
pantheon
manga?
of. Sorry?
What's manga?
Oh, it just means comic in
Okay.
Japanese. Yeah, yeah. But it's kind of anime also means animation, but it's kind of become its own thing that's distinct from American animation and American comics. But one thing I noticed about anime and manga was the fact that it was unapologetically Japanese. It was very much an authentic representation of their culture. And I think it planted a seed in my mind that, hold on, if the Japanese can represent their culture unapologetically, then why can't we as Nigerians do the same thing? And around that time, Nigerian or West African music started to become really popular in the West, and so that started to kind of unravel the colonial mentality in my mind because I started to see how valuable my own culture could be, and so I kind of went a complete 180 and really started to embrace more of my African heritage. But then I felt that I had gone to maybe a bit too much of an extreme because I started to resent Western culture and Western ideals. So I think where I'm at now is I think I found like a balance. Like I think all cultures have things that are terrible, but all cultures have things that are amazing. And rather than going from one extreme to the other, there are aspects of British and Western culture that I actually really like and that I embrace and I keep with myself. But there are also aspects of my culture that I love. And, I think Naval had a podcast interview where he kind of tries to say, I am nothing, in a way. And I wouldn't say that's quite me. I think I'm more of like Bruce Lee, which is, keep what is useful and discard what's unnecessary. And it's tough because identity is very tribalistic, and tribalism by its nature is quite simple. You're either with us or against us. But when you're trying to find nuance in how you chart your identity, it's very difficult because I think it in many ways is antithetical to what it is to be human.
There's a lot.
Yeah, I know.
That was good, dude. You touched on a lot. I mean, you opened up a little bit there too. Tell me about your time presenting Western culture. Like that's just very interesting.
Sure, I think it's once the other thing about growing up in Nigeria is they don't really teach you about history. So I knew
So
more about.
you didn't learn about Nigerian history going to school up until you're 15, really?
Yeah, you learn a little bit. Like literally, I think
But
first
it was
year
like
of.
just
Yeah.
kind of sprinkled in on top of a colonial
Yeah,
history.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
learn
I get it.
a lot more about British history, at least in what are considered the elite schools
Really?
in.
So they went into Winston Churchill and the queens and the monarchs and whatever, right? Henry and all that stuff. They went through yeah, Canterbury Tales. I mean, they really focused on Chaucer and Shakespeare and more than and I can see it. And I'm guessing I just want to confirm. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
That's kind of crazy, actually.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's mad.
Because none of you had any experience. Like, do you live amongst it when you're in Nigeria? There's no white people, there's no English people, right?
I mean, there are. It's kind of like the opposite of what you have in America, where the majority of people are American, and then you have a few immigrants. There are a few British, Indian, Chinese immigrants, but it's
Okay.
mainly Nigerian. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's primarily Nigerian, right?
Yeah.
That's just very interesting that it would be dominated by. Never really appreciate that. That's something that's talked about here, but coming from Africa, my perspective is that that would not happen for some reason. Like, I never looked at the colonialism of the UK and the different parts of the world it's been. I know it's not, just Africa. I never saw it that deep. I thought it was just much more surface thing, and something was a little further in the past. So that was really eye opening, man. So didn't mean to knock you off the story, or I guess you were, I was teeing something up, but you touched on that, and that's pretty interesting. And you're a storyteller, right? So you got into your thing. You probably got really into learning about it for the first time, right? In a really deep way.
Yeah, yeah. I think you know to quickly touch on a couple of things. I mean, it's different today. So people in school today learn more about the local and indigenous culture. So I'm happy that the younger generation is enjoying that. And as a storyteller, this is the other thing as well. Is I always saw myself. I'm mostly interested in sci-fi and fantasy. That's always been the type of story that I like to tell, or the types of story I like to tell. And so when I saw myself writing, the types of stories I imagined were closer to Lord of the Rings, I don't know, Game of Thrones or Star Wars than they were to the stories I've actually written so far, or I'm best known for.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
And the reason for that was, again, what I mentioned earlier was the colonial mentality. I just didn't know that there was any culture, because storytelling is fundamentally a function of the culture in which the story emerges from. So I just didn't realize that there was a culture back home that was worth using as the inspiration for my stories. And so
You
I think that
discovered that culture I'm sorry, you discovered that culture while you were actually not at home. You were in the UK, it sounds like, when you start to really discover this.
yeah, kind of. So I started to discover it when I was in the UK. Almost, I don't know what really kind of. I think it was there was a combination of things. I think around 2011, 2012 was the first time a Nigerian song had topped the UK charts, and I think that was significant because, again, growing up in Nigeria, before, when you used to go to nightclubs, the majority of the music was Western. Today, if you go to a nightclub or a bar, almost all of the music is local, like 99% of it. So you can see like these macro trends manifesting in society. And so I think when I remember once a white lady middle-aged white lady was like driving her car, bussing, like Afrobeats music around that time, that number one hit song. And so I think that kind of created a wave whereby we started to see our culture a little bit differently. And so I think that's the thing that started to plant the seed in my head that, hold on a second, if this can be done with music, maybe this can be done with storytelling as well.
Obviously, you've built a team of 15 people and you're creating IP around it. Um, yeah, you're doing something with remote work, and you said that you've done it. you'd gotten into it before COVID, right? You're a young group of people, so it was very natural to you. That's how, I mean, you guys are building the world, right? And uh, you're very comfortable with remote first, and you get a lot of things done, right? And you can work with really great talent in Africa, in the culture, so it's, kind of great, right? Why try to be, together in this type of situation? You know what I mean? Like, this is the type of situation that could only happen in a digital remote first, type of world, right? And there's going to be more of this.
Yeah, and I mean to bring it back to the waves, one song that I'm thinking about, "The Wave" by Jordan Peterson. I keep thinking back to that, and him talking about how it's like you're a surfer at the top of a literal wave, and I think that that's what is going on in my sphere of the world, where there's a sort of cultural renaissance going on across different countries in Africa, combined with the digital revolution, is literally creating a wave. And I'm one of the first people that has clocked onto that, and I'm so to speak one of the first surfers that has seen this wave coming, and now I'm riding it.
So, like, where are you today, and where are you going to be in 5 years, like with Kugali?
Where I am today or where we are today is, we're still very much thought of as an indie comic book publishing company, still best known for our collaboration with Disney, which is definitely going to be very big. But what the real ambition is, funny enough, the thing that actually got our collaboration with Disney is, my co-founder in an interview once said, our goal is to kick Disney's ass in Africa. And whilst we're not, obviously, like, that was meant in jest, and we have and we're very grateful to the opportunity that Disney has given us. The spirit of what he meant by that is very much the spirit in which we continue to operate, which is that's how big we're hoping to get. In the next 5 years, I want our stories, our characters, our intellectual property to be known globally. I told you that in 2012, we had the first Nigerian song topping the UK charts. In 5 years from now, it'll be what, like 2026. I want that to be commonplace. I want our movies, our comic books to be topping the charts both back at home and across the world.
Awesome. Really awesome. I like thinking big. So you're really connected with Disney now. I think we went past that. What's going on there? You're partnering with them, or?
Yeah, so we have a collaboration with Disney on a TV, or Disney Animation, I should say, on a TV show for Disney Plus. We're actually the first outside company that they've ever partnered with before. Disney Animation is they're very much an in-house outfit. There are other Disney entities that partner with people, but Disney Animation very specifically have done almost pretty much all of their projects in-house. So we have a TV show coming out with it's called Iwaju, which is a sci-fi story set in Lagos, Nigeria, where I'm from originally. So that's slated to come out in 2023. I think that's probably the beginning of what I feel could be a long-term partnership, because I think this collaboration has been really cool for them, because they've been able to benefit from, we're very raw and innovative, and we do things differently because we're not part of a pre-existing status quo, whereas they have the experience and the know-how. So I think that's what makes the collaboration extremely powerful, and I don't see any reason why this can't be the beginning of more things to go. But I mean, even outside of that, we're continuing to develop our IP. We have discussions with many of the big players in the market, and we'll see how it grows. But I'm very confident that you'll be seeing more and more of Kugali and our collaborations.
Where else are you going to get this, right? I mean, I think it's specific knowledge, right? Where he talks about if you're a deep sea diver and, you become known for hunting treasures and finding things that nobody else can get to. somebody comes across something that they can't get to, guess what? Their luck just became your luck, right? That's specific knowledge. And Disney's willing to do something they don't normally do because of what, because you guys are really a great prototype of, the digital world, right? A diverse group of people bringing together their story that's very authentic, um, and scaling it for purpose. You didn't mention, I want to go from X million to so and so million, right? You were very purpose driven. So everything you're doing from your, you guys aren't white, right? You're a diverse group. You're different. You're something that people are bringing into this colonial culture around the world, right? That's part of that change that you were talking about, that cultural shift that's happening in different parts of the world. You're telling an authentic story. I'm just going to repeat myself, right? Of course, Disney's going to step out. Of course, they're going to do something they don't normally do because you're a hot commodity right now, dude.
Yeah, thank you. And funny enough, I'm glad you brought up the Naval Naval wave with the specific knowledge, because I think I have a very, or historically, I've had a very kind of negative interpretation of the events that have happened in my life. Partially because Nigerian culture is very um, it's very intense, particularly for I think both men and women from Nigerian culture have different challenges. But as a man from Nigeria, particularly as a first son, the expectations are huge. I come from a household where if you get B's, the question is why didn't you get A's? If you get A's, the question is why didn't you get A pluses? So there's always been this feeling of never quite feeling good enough. So even when we achieved a lot of our early success as a company, I kind of chalked it off to luck. And it was only when I understood, when I listened to the Naval wave and I understood the four different types of luck, that I started to allow myself to feel a sense of accomplishment for what I've done. Because I realized that, yes, it is luck, but it's not the type of luck that you just go to the beach and you're trying to dig for treasure. It's very much a specific luck that's a function of my skill set, my character, and the time that I'm living in, and I'm really grateful for that perspective, because it's been very liberating to finally give myself a pat on the back.
Well, there you go. Give yourself a pat on the back. Keep doing it. Maybe daily, at least
Thank
every
you.
other day. So, what else is interesting about Ziki? You probably spend a lot of time working. What else do you do beside work and listen to Meaningwave?
Well, outside of, I always say that, Kugali is my wife and combat sports is my mistress, particularly K1 kickboxing and Thai boxing. I mean, I've been doing martial arts for a young age. I hadn't been consistent until I hit my mid 20s. So I did taekwondo and karate when I was younger, and then I did a bit of Krav Maga, and then eventually I landed and then actually I did a bit of MMA as well. But then eventually I landed on Thai boxing and kickboxing, and I just fell in love with it. And that's pretty much what I spend almost all of my non-work time doing, apart from maintaining relationships with my friends and family. I'm pretty much obsessed with it. I harbor ambitions of becoming, at the very least, a national champion in the sport. So yeah, that's my answer.
Wait, you're a national champion?
No. That's
Okay.
my goal.
So you actually have a goal within that now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. Cool, dude. Does your team produce like drawing tutorials for some of their art?
We do a little bit of that. I mean, more
Really?
for kind of content marketing as opposed to something that we purposely
Right.
do. Yeah.
My son's into it, and he said that he wants to be a street artist today. And I was like, great. This sounds great. I think you could do it. I think there's a market for it. I mean, the guys that I watch on YouTube, right? Because it's authenticity, right? And you can gain a massive following just by doing something authentic, whether it's teaching people how to draw, and there's a ton of them, um, creating IP like you do, to Lucas Barar, this Swedish guitar player who just like blows my mind all the time, right? He did the Coffin song in 15 different styles, and it's just ridiculous, right? There's like,
Oh, I need
why?
to check that out.
But it's fun, right? I got to play it for my family this morning. My son loves the Coffin song, and he did it in Bach, did it in funk. I didn't see Britpop in there, but maybe there was. uh Akira had referenced Britpop as being all over the next album. Did you see him say that on Twitter by chance?
No, I didn't actually.
Yeah, and like I don't know what Britpop is. Like, I guess I'm gonna have to wait because I'm not gonna go research it, but I probably have heard it somewhere. Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to the next album. I think hopefully it's out before Christmas. Be a nice gift.
Oh yeah, yeah. Fingers crossed.
Did you see which who the artist is? I think it's Jordan B. Peterson. I think
Oh
that's who
yeah,
you
yeah,
have.
yeah. I know he said he was going to do a new one with Jordan Peterson, so I imagine that's probably it.
Yeah, because I think there was one that he did that he said he wasn't going to do. I think it was either the I think it was the Scott Adams one. He said he slid that in there. He didn't plan to do it, but
Hmm.
he had to do it. So we talked about the user interface to reality, which was awesome. I heard what is it? The basket
Basket
case
case.
theory.
Yeah.
And it's much different than the user interface of reality. Just like volume 1 and volume 2 of how to get rich are completely different. And I had the same type of reaction. The way How to Get Rich Volume 2 starts it's not lo-fi, right? It's like going into something else,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It had this dissonance, right? So it was like a really interesting thing going on. But I grew to really quickly love that album. And then Basket Case Theory comes out, and it has like the saxophone or whatever woodwinds going on there. And it's like, what? This isn't. And again, like, I didn't come to Akira or, start listening to the user interface reality because of lo-fi anyway, right? It was because of Scott Adams, just because
Yeah.
of the message, right? Music was the added bonus. But it was jarring at first, right? Because ever since, I guess, user interface to reality, or shortly thereafter that, he did get out of that lo-fi thing until this Christmas album just dropped. That's been pretty cool. And he did get into this more, with the Theo Vaughn album as well, and Ayahuasca Beats, or I think what fully symbolic creatures, whatever he called it, with what's his name? Help me out
Graham
with his name.
Graham Hancock.
Graham Hancock, right? So the waves have evolved completely. How have you seen that? Like, I just went on a little rant there about the evolution of music styles and the waves. Is it that apparent to you?
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Before I thought of it as a sort of lo-fi thing I could play in the background from time to time, but I can see. I mean, I used to be really heavy into music when I was younger. I wanted to become a musician actually. Still might do so later down the line. We'll see what the future holds. But point being is that I definitely have noticed that it's evolved, but I think it's for the better, because that's part of the artist's journey, is constantly reinventing yourself and trying new things. And I think it's worked far more often than it hasn't.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it would have been. I don't think I'd be listening to Akira right now if he just kept going with the same old lo-fi. Right? It's really cool to kind of curiosity. Right? Going back to user interface to reality, baking curiosity wherever you can.
Oh yeah,
If you're trying to persuade,
that
if
too.
you're building a media company and you want to get eyes. So how do you use that in your writing? I guess that's got to be pretty prominent, man. Like, what's your writing process?
So
Not to
writing.
get too geeky about writing, but whatever.
I mean, the thing is, I've always had an overactive imagination ever since I was 5. Well, ever since I could remember. I like when my parents would buy me toys, I would literally map out scenarios with like my different toys, creating a plot. I didn't realize that that's what I was doing at the time, but that's what I was doing. So in many ways, I feel like that's what I was born to do, because I spent, and even in school, uh, I didn't play that many until I hit about 13. I wasn't super sporty until I was about 13 years old. Before that, I would literally just sit during lunch breaks and tell my friends stories as well. So I feel like my brain is almost a story generating machine. So whenever I have a new project, it's weird because I don't necessarily come up with something new. It's like there's almost a repository of many different stories that just exist in my mind. I mean, I've started to kind of map them out on paper as well. And I just kind of try and understand the parameters of what I'm working with. You know, what medium is it? What kind of platform? What am I hoping to achieve with the story? And then based off of that, the appropriate story will kind of emerge from my mind, and then I then start to build out the world, the themes, the characters, and then once I have that, then I start to map out the plot, and everything kind of takes care of itself from there.
It's all work, right? So you're just kind of producing, kind of layering and layering and layering.
Exactly.
Do you use visual like storyboards today? Like, are you drawing out storyboards?
Not really. I use more mood boards, or I'll kind of, because I've read a lot of comics and manga over the years, I almost have a like an eidetic memory of, oh, okay, like there's this frame from this panel that, or there's this scene from this comic that really represents what I'm trying to achieve here. So I almost have like a visual database as well. I'm not particularly artistically talented, even though I work with a lot of extremely talented artists. For some reason, I just don't have the patience to draw. So I tend to prefer to use reference, or I might just ask someone to help me out.
That's interesting. Yeah, I kind of assumed you were an artist just based off seeing the website and stuff like that. That's cool.
Oh yeah, no. Only storytelling.
When
I
did you
can kind
start
of
writing? Like, when
draw.
did you? When's the earliest memory you have of just like sitting down and not just writing something once, but being like, "Oh, I'm doing this." You know?
I only started taking it seriously when I was, I think, about 19 years old, because it was actually my sister that encouraged me. Because I realized that there was actually a career in this. You know, again, in Nigeria, the only viable careers are lawyer, doctor, banker, engineer, that type of thing. So I always just figured it was going to be one of those four things for me. But when I realized that, hold on a second, right? Like, someone, the people who have made my favorite animations, comic books, etc., like someone has made those things and someone has gotten paid to do those things. So the moment I realized that, okay, people do get paid to do this, at 19, I started just putting pen to paper on a bunch of different ideas. So that was like the earliest I formally started writing outside of, you know, creative writing in school.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Somebody does get paid to do those things. They just don't appear out of thin air. I mean, they kind of do, but you know, somebody has to be the vessel. Um, and that's like a really nice, simple thought. Like, oh yeah, people are getting paid, right? Like Joe Rogan says this, and I think it was I, what's it? What's the song when Jordan Peterson asks him a question? We don't have to, if you know it off the top of your head. It's like, you know,
Oh, well, like, look at me. You can. No. Is it from the Joe Rogan album?
it is. He
Yeah, I
says, "Tell
know.
me what you were like in school." And he
Oh, yeah, I
said,
used to be something. I
"Oh,
was.
so
Yeah.
someone I was afraid of, or
Yeah.
I became someone I was afraid of." So I
Oh,
think
yeah. That
somebody
was
I was
it. Yeah.
afraid of. Yeah, and you know, he starts talking about how I realized at a certain point. Oh no, I think it was fight. No, it's fighting all the time. Fighting all the time. When he talks about how they get punch drunk. You know, the dangers of kickboxing, and you know, you're basically, you know, people were showing up with headaches like all the time, and he said he's
Mm.
very lucky. And he basically just he says, well, you know what? Because of kickboxing, I realized that if I apply myself, I can kind of do anything. And I guess there's people making money in comedy, so I just did it. All right. I think I beefed up the you know, what Joe says on there a little bit, but that's the essence of it. It's like just so super simple, right? Like just apply yourself like you had in anything else you've done, and you know, go do it there.
Yeah, I mean, and to kind of mix a few different things together, I can't remember what the album is called, but there's the David Foster Wallace Wave where he talks about fish in
Time
water.
out. Is that a whole album?
Yeah, yeah, it is.
I got to get on that. Okay, go ahead, bud.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's really good actually. But you know, the one about the fish talking about like what the hell is water. I think the analogy I'm trying to draw there is that oftentimes when we find ourselves in a particular situation, we don't we don't really understand it because we're surrounded by it. I remember I was having lunch with an old professor from a university, what you know Americans will call college. And funny enough, he's actually really interested in storytelling. You know, he wants to do a comic book and he wants to do a documentary. And he was asking me for advice. And when I was telling him all the advice, he was like, "Man, like this makes a lot of sense, but I would never have thought about it because he's a product of a structure that has a particular way of doing things, and so anything outside of that status quo just doesn't seem to make sense, despite how obvious it is. That's why every great idea, oftentimes you're like, man, like, how did I not think about that? You know?
Yeah, because you don't want to get fired, right? Or you grew up in or you're growing up, or you're in this kind of, hey, the status quo is the way to go, which is, it's it's colonialism, maybe. I don't know, right? It's like it's a brainwashing of, just kind of get in line, let us build this thing, right? Um, so you do shut yourself off to innovation. I work in open source, and I'm really excited about the company I work at. We're doing exciting things. We just kind of revamped our sales force to be young people that are digital first. We didn't care if they had necessarily a strong background in technology. It was, are they able to apply themselves and complete meaningful projects. And so I kind of see it happening. It's just really cool, because that's the way everything's going. Like I said, you're a hot commodity because you're kind of a different part of that as an entrepreneur. But that's what's happening in the world. Lost my train of thought there for a little bit. I'm kind of excited about all that. I'm trying to see how where my specific knowledge plays into that. I like talking about it, right? So hopefully people get a really good sense from meeting you, Ziki, over the many years they'll be watching this podcast, that you can just really apply yourself with some specific knowledge in an area that you mentioned it, referring to another wave, right? Opportunity meets not preparation, but what was it?
I think it's what's the word like opportunity meets luck plus preparation. But I think that's more. I don't know if that's type three luck, but it's one of like the four types of luck. Whereas I guess the highest one is where luck to destiny. You know, it's like you build your character in a certain way, and then your character becomes your destiny. So in many ways, it's weird. Like when I reflect back on my life, it's it almost feels like there's a sense of inevitability as to where I was headed. I think if I'm thinking about myself as like a dish, when I start to think about the ingredients that was poured into the dish, because I think one thing I really inherited from my father was an entrepreneur as well. So I think already from a young age, I always used to think outside the box. I always used to see things that I didn't like. And most of my friends would respond with, well, that's just the way it is. So let's play the game. Whereas my thinking was, well, how do I change the game to be more favorable to me?
That's where I was going, I think. Yeah, because you got to do things that are different, right? You really have to look at the playing field, and the old way isn't going to work, right? The kind of structured, work it up many layers through the system. You know, things happen fast nowadays, right? Like it has to be happening in Africa, right? I mean, your team has to be in Africa, right? Can you do what you do without your team being in Africa?
No, we can't do what we do without having some African. It's funny, we can't do what we do without both. Right now, all the money is in the West, so we need a team here to maintain those relationships. But the talent is back home, so we need a team there to maintain that relationship.
So how can I find your content? Like if I'm roaming around the world, like what type of people and, who's your audience primarily and how do they view your stuff?
Sure. So, I mean, if you like comic books, then if you just go to Kugali.com, you can find all of our comics. They range from sort of more comic-y comics like your Marvel and DC. I mean, they're different, but that's the closest analog I can use to explain them. But we are working on a more kind of Scott Adamsy, Dilbert project as well for those people who are a bit more not as heavy comic aficionados. So Kugali.com, you'll be able to find all of that stuff. Then, if you're more of a film or TV person, then in 2023, if you subscribe to Disney Plus, you'll be able to watch our TV show as well that's coming out there.
When in 2023? My little guy is right. So my little guy, he's 18 months. He's we got a tile floor, a hallway, literally 6 feet from my shoulder right here. And he's riding around boom, 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 over the little wooden wheels of his little wooden tricycle, going over each little tile groove. So that's
Oh,
why I've been going on and off.
oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, no worries. Like I said, my I think my brothers are a little bit older than your kids, but not that much. Like probably like a couple of years older across each of them. And like whenever I babysit, it's weird. You feel like, at least for me anyway, I used to think like, how is it that I can't take my eyes off you for five minutes? Like I put you in a safe position, then I look away, and then I look back like 5 minutes later, and I'm like, no, no, don't do that. But it's fun in a way.
yeah, dude. Um, but the what you're doing with what did you say, man? You were
Oh
crap.
yeah, you had asked me when in 2023.
Oh
So we're
yeah, yeah. When in
talking, yeah,
2023?
yeah.
Wait,
So
2022 or 2023?
23, 2023.
23. Okay, so
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
got a little bit more than a year. When's it hitting, dude? I'm excited.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. And the studio hasn't committed to a specific release date yet, but I'm hoping that around the summer we might be able to present this to the world. So we'll see how it goes, but hopefully summer 2023.
So you have to have everything ready. Like you have to have it. Is it going to be a serial? Is it going to be series, or is it going to be a feature
Yeah, so
film?
it's going to be a series. I'm not sure how the studio plans to, because Disney's going to be in control of the distributions. I don't know if they're going to do the Netflix model where they release all the episodes, or they release them weekly. But one thing that's unique about the way that we're working is usually for the scale of the project that we're doing, it would typically take the studio about 5 to maybe even 7 years to complete it. We're trying to do this thing in about 3.5 years, so we're trying to do it about twice as quickly as has ever been done before. So it's a bit of it's a marathon, but you're sprinting to complete the marathon.
Why can you do it more quickly?
What, even quicker?
Yeah. Why? Well, no. Why are you able to do it? And let's just call it half the time at Disney can.
Um, why? I think because generally speaking, the studio has operated under a very drawn out process. And I think the process is good because it's really being meticulous about the level of quality control. And I think what they're trying to do is say, okay, how can we maintain that same level of quality, but then do things a lot faster? So I mean, you might be a bit more aware of this, but it's adopting a bit more of like an agile methodology rather than like more of a waterfall methodology. So it's kind of like an inherent innovation within the studio. Another cool thing as well is
When
because
did
we're
you learn
doing a
about
series.
Agile versus Waterfall?
Sorry.
When did you learn about Agile versus Waterfall?
When I first started my startup journey, I was reading a bunch of books, and so at my university they had a sort of free entrepreneurship course for students, and one of the recommended reading requirements was Lean Startup by I think it's Eric Rice, where he talks about that. So that was the first time I had heard about it.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, that's not widely known outside of, I guess I'm glad to hear at least in the university setting as of, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, right? That's really cool, but it should be more widely applied. I tried to explain it to somebody I was trying to do some business with, to give me a package, which is great and all. And I said, I'm just not there. I'm looking to do it like, agile, right? Like I've already taken it to the goal line, right?
Yeah,
I need it agile.
yeah,
And,
and I think
but it's not
yeah,
well known, right? It was kind of, there was a dissonance there, but it's cool,
yeah,
right?
100%. And I
I
think
think more people need to know that.
yeah, 100%. I think that it's something that's, very deep seated within the cultural zeitgeist of the sort of software industry. But I think the entertainment industry can benefit a lot from it. And this is something that I want to really spearhead as an entrepreneur, as a creator, say what happens if we adopt an agile methodology to our story creation process? Because no, typically with a movie, you don't know how well it does until it comes out, and there has to be a better way of kind of incrementally. I mean, with a theatrical release, it might be difficult, but with a TV show, with a comic book, I think that there are better ways of being more incremental about the development process. So you don't know whether or not it's going to succeed until the book comes out. I think that leaves you a bit blindsided.
Yeah, it'll get into the culture quickly because, like you said, it's getting into animation and media. I think it's going to hit every part of the work world. Like, that's why I went on that little tangent about where I work. Right, they're recognizing that. Oh, there now we're spilling everything possible from the playpen on the floor. I love it. And geez, Holden in 10, 15, not 10 years, he's 18 months, but Holden in 15, 20 years, like who even knows, right?
Oh yeah. It's,
Yeah, man, I love it. That's is there anything you want to wrap up on? You want to?
uh, Nothing in particular. I think we've, done some really good broad strokes. I suppose the only thing to really touch upon, given the theme of this podcast is maybe I'll just, surmise what I feel like I've benefited the most from listening to the waves. And it's quite multifaceted, to be honest, because each wave is very different. It's almost like a spiritual resource you can call upon to apply to different areas of your life. But I think before, my self-development journey was very much a case of I would read a book, I would have the motivation, but eventually it would whittle away and it would become almost abstract. But I think something about the combination of music plus philosophy or self-development talk and whatnot really, again, it speaks to one of the waves, repetition and simplicity, has really helped me reshape my mindset much more quickly than I've ever been able to do so. So in many ways, it's made me a much more potent self author. And I think the amount of evolution I've experienced in the last year, where I've really been a true convert to the waves, has been far quicker than previously. And I think it's that image of yourself, or that concept of who you are, because once you believe in yourself to a very, very high degree, then it sounds cliche, but the world becomes different. It's almost like you're in the matrix and you can start to see the code and see how to tweak the code to bend reality in your favor, as opposed to the other way around.
In it, in it so in it so I mean, that's what you try to help. That's what I hope people get from listening today too, right? To us, what we talked about today, as well. It's been the biggest thing for me. 2021 was the first year where I was fully, into the wave. Actually, I think it was last year too. It was actually probably 2 full years, right? So I'm 2 full years in. And yeah, you better believe it. And it's that nuance, but it's not really nuance to me anymore, that you can alter your reality. It's not a silly thing, right? You can be in control of how things unfold in front of you. Get your head wrapped around that, because it's kind of true. It's not just kind of true, it is true. And there's certain things you can do to apply to your everyday to increase your odds of, you landing in that groove more often than not, to a point where it's almost consistent.
Well,
But
once you see it,
that's kind
you
of
can't
foreign
unsee
to
it.
a lot of people,
Mhm.
I think, because the waves are weird.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. But like Scott Adams says, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
You see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's so that means this is all about the mating process. If we're going to go to that song,
I mean,
kind of.
this will open a whole other tangent, but yes, it kind of is, to be
Isn't
honest.
that funny? Well, you know what? That might be the best thing to wrap it up on, man. That was so cool. Oh, that's why that's happening. Duh, it's a
Mhm.
mating process, dude. That is
You should know that the mating instinct is the base of pretty much all of your impulses. So if you haven't learned that pretty much everything from the way you talk, present yourself, hold yourself, dress, everything you do is some kind of expression of your mating instinct, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not.
Let the beat rock.
Everything you show off about that you don't want to show if you have a flaw, pretty much everything you do comes back to wanting to look good and present yourself well for mating purposes. Once you understand that, you start to understand where the buttons are, because you'll say, oh, that's why that's happening. It's an extension of the mating process. Oh, that's why that's happening. It's an extension of the mating process. Oh, that's why that's happening. It's an extension of the mating process. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll see it everywhere. Oh, that's why that's happening. It's an extension of the mating process. It's like the veil will come off and you'll start seeing everybody's actions as, wait a minute, why is it? Everything is compatible with that showing off for mating purposes situation. Showing off for mating purposes situation.
Let the beat rock.
Oh, that's why that's happening. It's an extension of the mating process. Oh, that's why that's happening. It's an extension of the mating process. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You'll see it everywhere. Oh, that's why that's happening. It's an extension of the mating process.